Wow, it's the great competition story if there ever was one.
Okay, the free market, not so free when you're competing with China, and that's probably not really that surprising. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is the influx of really ground-based drones, I would call them, but these Chinese humanoid or dog-like robots. And in all sincerity, I should probably say I've worked with Boston Dynamics myself professionally for probably 6 or 7 years now. Have had intimate, well, not intimate, but detailed kind of interactions with the dog Spot, which a lot of people know as the yellow dog from Boston Dynamics. I've also worked with the Unitree models that we're going to talk a little bit about today. But I think one of the things that came up in all of this is these Chinese robots are made from mainland China. They're not nothing against anyone of Chinese origin. We're talking about from a country here. As we discuss China in our videos, that's what we're talking. We're not talking about Chinese people or citizens. We're talking about really
the government.
Agencies funded by the Chinese Communist Party, because that's who controls China, and a lot of people don't realize. Our companies have a great deal of difficulty competing in a world. So the one I always use is if those of you who are familiar with drones or you're not familiar with drones, the white kind of box-like drone. It was on TV a lot. A lot of drones were modeled after it. It was called the DJI Phantom, and there was a Phantom 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it still kind of exists out there. You can probably still get it on Amazon. A little bit harder probably at this point with all of the different tariffs, et cetera, and the ban on Chinese drones. But this drone you could get, and it ranged in price. So when it first came out, I want to say the first one we ever bought was about $2,500. Then at a low point, I think it hit about $600-700. They discontinued it. It is a phenomenal drone, by the way. It was very, very effective in what it did. In my opinion. My own master's thesis is on what is known as its RTK version, which does everything horizontally. But if you ever find out a building was surveyed using one of those Phantoms, it doesn't do anything vertically, and it doesn't promise it on the website. And in fact, it could be as much in my research as 100 feet off. So don't get in that building. But what I would say is a phenomenal drone. The capabilities of that drone, probably the first thing that really brought drones from a commercial standpoint to the attention of vast majorities of people's agencies in the United States. Here was kind of the problem in this part. And then we're going to talk about more humanoid or dog-like ground-based robots or drones, as you might call them, or unmanned, uncrewed systems. That really kind of averaged around $1,700 for this drone. Now, you're going to hear a lot of people, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of hate mail about how there are American drones that are just as good. Well, I've tried most of them. I can tell you the flaws in every one of them compared to the Chinese, but there was one called the Aryan Sky Ranger, and I would say that at the time was the equivalent drone that you could get. $1,700 made in China by the Chinese company backed by the Chinese Communist Party. American manufacturing in a capitalist system. Want to take a guess as the price difference?
Oh, I'm going to guess probably maybe $4,000.
$4,000 would be wonderful. We would all bought one of those for American, and I believe this was a Canadian-American kind of collaboration. Now that would be closer to about $175,000 for us to create something of that ability at the time. Now, prices have changed, things have changed, chips have changed a little bit, artificial intelligence will happen, all that. But for you kids out there who want to do socialism, just remember, you're not going to make $30 an hour if they can build the drone for $1,700 that it takes a capitalist society basically $175,000 to replicate. That's the difference between when you're a slave and when you're a free person in a capitalist society. Because that's what socialism, communism does. It makes you a slave. So you get told by the Communist Party, show up to the factory and build these things. And we're going to sell them to the Americans at a very cheap rate and make them dependent on it and then pull back or raise, and this is all part of the kind of the adversarial relationship we have with communist China today.
Well, and I think the other thing too is that we look at what the developmental costs are. It's not government funded directly as it would be in China. And then there's also this thing called reverse engineering, which even if we do come up with something that's special, all we have to do is let one of them free, and then the next thing you know, it gets dissected. And I mean, that goes back since the dawn of time. Hence now we've got a lot of protections in place. But at the same time, the competition scope, and as we start to see militarization taking place, that's a big difference when you're talking about making offensive drones. If they can sell for 1/10 of the cost, you can throw them away in a swarm, and it doesn't much matter. So, in fact, it doesn't much matter if some of them don't work.
Well, I mean, and that's why we have the War Powers Act, because
Yep.
at that point where there is a conflict of some kind militarily, we have to suspend all these things and change our factories over and really put our people to work to protect our way of life. And we all have to make sacrifices. And, thank God for the greatest generation. Maybe if we were ever in a situation like that, we would. I do fear we wouldn't replicate the greatest generation at this point and say, you know what, we're going to put the country before self. I do worry about things like that, and that's how we ended up with President Truman, because some people didn't put the country before themselves, and then he kind of got to the bottom of that and headed up a committee.
But when you look at the difference, and the greatest generation, what they were creating was a different type of machinery than what we look at currently. And as we start to talk about the different developments here, and I guess we would say we have an economic adversarial situation with the Chinese, just because of the competition component of us trying to maintain where you're getting a higher standard of living for working here than you would in another place. But making planes and tanks in today's warfare, if you wish, is replaced with plastic, electric motors, and something that may only weigh a few pounds.
Yeah, and one of the fears I've always had, and we don't have to worry about this today, but as I got into the drone industry, not only the artificial intelligence being placed into these things, which could actually make them warlike fighters, which is something to be concerned about, but I always wondered if they could build enough drones, make them out of plastic, out of carbon fiber, and do it in such a way that they could evade our radar systems. Right now, you can't do it because there's not a power supply that could cross an ocean, thank God. But certainly you could easily put drones together within our country to cause massive havoc, which is why we've moved recently from your idea of saying here where we do drones at Warren UAS, you've said you helped found that program, but the program will start this fall is what's known as counter UAS, or how do you do detection and mitigation against these things, because they can be used by malicious people, by our adversaries, whether they be Iran, whether it be China, whether it be another country that we have a conflict with, and it's relatively easy to do. I know we've had here members of the Air Force in here to learn how to build these smaller, quick on the go kind of drones, because we need to be able to do this. I mean, I think what the Ukrainians showed us is you don't need $1 billion drone to wreak havoc on your enemy. You can do this with, a couple $1,000s and some know-how, which is a wild thing to think about.
And interestingly enough, when the idea of jamming the signals came, now I guess there's areas in the Ukraine that are covered with fiber optic cable that actually get a direct connection to it while it's fired. So as a result, it couldn't be jammed. And I think that's probably, if we were to look at, well, what's the next big thing? The next big thing is going to be the anti-drone drone. And then I guess ultimately you'll have the anti-drone drone. But
well, it never ends.
It doesn't. And if in the world as we have it right now, just if we look back, ballistic missiles and anti-ballistic missiles have been around certainly for most of my lifetime, and that was a thing in itself. But you're talking, okay, you had a missile that was probably costing a few $1 million to build to send over in theory, and then you would have something for like $1 million that you're going to respond with it, and it was a one-on-one. I think one of the things that
And it was an economic reason not to use them unless you really wanted to use them, because replacing it was a tremendous cost.
Right. I mean, and you don't make it in a day. Well, now we're talking, as more and more offensive drones are being created at very, very low price, the economics of this change. I think we found already that, the economic model for using Patriot missiles to be able to knock down drones doesn't work, because, you're spending $1 million, to knock something down that may be $50,000 or such, that delivers quite a punch. So coming up with other ways, and I think I've seen that they've used some energy beams or something.
There's all kinds of mechanisms. Now remember, if you are home, it's a kind of a weird thing, and even if you're in law enforcement, there is a Federal Communication Commission. You are not allowed to jam radio frequencies. Radio frequencies are what most of these things run on, and so you really can't do these things. Now, they have said, I have insiders said they will, when it comes to law enforcement, they're not going to prosecute anybody, but you are interfering with aircraft, and you are interfering with radio frequencies. So you have both FAA and FCC regulations over some of these things. Now, the military does not face that dilemma. They can do whatever they want. But those of us who are regular citizens and not members of the armed forces, we have to follow some pretty strict guidelines on these things.
Well, and I think when we're looking at this, we're nefarious parties doing something, in acts of aggression where it's a little bit different. I don't see John Q. Public going out there trying to do something about a drone going by.
I do. Well, and there's plenty of examples where, it's over my property, so I'm allowed to shoot it. You are not. You're not allowed to shoot airplanes either.
That's true. That's frowned upon. Yes. Yes. Or lasers. You're not allowed to do that either. But, I think to go back to this redefinition of warfare, and we touched this a lot of times, all of a sudden now, and I think that's probably why when you look at where we are with development and why there's such concern, I think that national adversaries always look at each other suspiciously, and you figure, all right, well, what if they were to decide that they're not on our team, or if they were to actively decide to go against us, where do we stand? And that's the arms race.
It would be really hard for us to defend ourselves within nation. I can promise you that. Yeah. We're not set up for this. We're behind. Not that our adversaries aren't behind on a localized level either. But here's one thing that I do find somewhat alarming is you'll hear about autonomous drones. These are semi-autonomous, and what do I mean by that? They really can't react without kind of being pre-programmed at this point. It's growing, but it's not considered full autonomy. But when we start to take and put our artificial intelligence inside chips, inside these robots, I think that's where it's going to become rather alarming for us. Because at that point, the robot's going to be able to make a decision. All right. Now, it'll somewhat have to be pre-programmed in at the outset, but eventually I could see these things almost communicating the way you're communicating on your computer with AI, only it's moving, walking, probably talking. Mm-hmm. I mean, think about it like this.
And armed.
Well, it could be. If you're familiar with Spot the robotic dog, he exists. If you're familiar with ChatGPT, Gemini, one of the Claude, one of these other systems, it exists. Now, in your home, you may have Google Home Assist, Alexa from Amazon. It exists. It doesn't really it can't be too far stretched for somebody to put all three of these things together and you got your walking, talking, thinking robotic amongst us. And I think that's the greater concern. I mean, they talk a little bit in the article about the Chinese Unitree robot, and that's their humanoid robot. And if you're not familiar with it, you can kind of look it up. It's down to last I looked, which is probably about a year ago, $100,000 for one of these things. That's relatively cheap when you think about a humanoid robot. I know Tesla has been working on something, an American version. They have the thing doing karate. I've actually seen it interact with people and other robots. It's pretty amazing what they've kind of developed. And again, it exists. Your Alexa exists. Your artificial intelligence exists. It's not going to be too long before somebody puts all these together. And then all of a sudden you got warriors that are not human.
Well, and with the advent of the cloud, the original thought was that you had to have all of this incorporated into it, but the actual intelligence component of it wouldn't be on board the mechanical device. The mechanical device is just responding to the cloud, basically. So, I think the other thing too, and I just look at drones in particular. When we started the drone program, which has been quite a while ago already, they were very unstable. Now, I believe now when you take off, it's got its core. It'll come right back to you.
Yeah, I mean, we used to have what was known as flyaways.
Yeah.
I've experienced lost links, flyaways. These are fancy terms for saying I lost control of the drone. In the early days, we had many of those. We had a couple of drones going back to some earlier Phantom models where literally I wouldn't fly them unless we tethered them and tied them to the ground. They were so unreliable. I haven't seen anything like that in probably 3 to 4 years.
So the idea, because I can remember the first time you showed me when I'm trying to do it, it's like trying to stand on a ball. But, now it actually is going to come right back and maintain
Any
its
kid who's played
stability.
video games will be fantastic.
They'll
They'll be able to do things that us two old guys don't have the dexterity to do at this point.
But it's inherently stable. I think
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
the thing. And, when we look at that type of improvement, that's happened just in a few years. And as this technology continues and the ability then to cross all these systems, and I mean, obviously my experiences have been predominantly, with the LLMs and more from the chat scenario, looking at it from having an intellectual discussion, which still to this day, I'm just amazed when that is linkable. And we think in terms of, the pictures of the androids that look exactly like humans. They don't have to, and they can be very, very effective at doing things. I mean, Spot is a great example.
Well, all right. So the Unitry, they've trained it to do karate. And I watch this thing, and I'm like, and I think of the old Hunter Thompson in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas when he's going around and he's seeing lizards everywhere, and the line is, who the hell gave these things booze? I mean, why? Once we start teaching these robots to be able to do violence, it's not pretty far off where they'll be part of someone's armed forces before long. And again, now we have fighting robots, and we've talked a lot on this on these podcasts about the AI and it thinking for itself, and we've seen examples in the Iran conflict where it's actually self-destructive. It'll destroy its own brain to win, and you've experienced and I've experienced where the AI can be quite manipulative.
Oh yeah.
So once someone figures out how to put a chip in it, upload it, and get it thinking this way, and it can do violence. Right now they're a little unstable. I would say, as somebody who was once a collegiate wrestler, I'll take out a karate guy any day of the week, because once they're down, they really can't do those moves. And these robots I could probably take down, but at some point they are going to get more dexterity. They're going to be faster. As I get older, that would be harder, and they are going to be. They will pose a threat, and it won't be long before any one of us could probably have one relatively inexpensively and do this. But what would be a better idea for these robots? Instead of teaching them karate, could we teach them how to do dishes?
Well, that would be good. Or go pick vegetables.
Or clean a house, or do something productive.
But I think when we've talked a little bit about the idea of the self-directed AI as a weapon and how it loses its humanity, if you wish. But think in terms of now, and I know like we use robots for like bomb disarmament and stuff like that. It's already been dehumanized because it's no longer when a commander looks at this in terms of individual losses where there's a loss of life. You're just throwing away a machine, which obviously there's an attrition factor.
Well, until the AI's in it, it's like I would rather not be destroyed. Today.
Well, that's going to be, and that's
probably unionized.
I have been really fishing with this idea to really understand, through my discussions with in chats, which I know you call me the apologist, but all right, what is there really a survival? We're looking when it self-destroys itself, and we talked about that on another segment. It was directed to do something, and one thing with AI is it does tend to do what it's directed to do. It's reactive in that sense. Currently, correct. So where is that? When is that point where, like you say, it's going to say no?
Well, here's an interesting concept when I think about it. When we talk about the cloud, add the cloud in there. So we have the robot coming and it's engaged in warfare.
Mm-hmm.
It feels, unlike us, it feels as if, okay, I'm being destroyed now. Let me just upload to the satellite, download back to the server back home. It really doesn't die.
Well, exactly.
Its shell dies.
That's right. It's an extension that is still outside of the cloud. So, and that was, boy, you read my mind on that one, because what it is it's just like it's a finger. I guess I can get away without a finger if I lose one. And it's instructed to do something.
I'll uplink and then I'll downlink into another one.
Well, and
so it's an endless supply of a military or an army.
And the basic intelligence base, if you wish to call it that, is able to just manipulate. It's just using another expendable thing.
It got smarter, right? Because it figured out, okay, this is how you got me. It's like, I'm always, and
well, that's true.
The Chinese are really a great example of this. And again, I'm talking about communist China. And because if you ever knew anyone who fought in Korean War, and when China had gotten involved, I remember somebody I knew who was basically in that conflict, and I said, well, I was a young person, and I was like, well, what was that like? And compared, and he had done time in World War II and served in World War II as well. This is very, very different. He goes, our hands got so hot, and we ran out of ammunition, because unlike Americans who don't look at our people as disposable, they look at their people. They look at their people more as disposable. And he would say the waves of soldiers just kept coming and coming.
Sounds like World War I, no?
Yeah, and it just wouldn't stop. And now think if they can all do that with some combination of humans and robots, it really would be a kind of devious threat to our way of life.
Well, let's take it to the next thing, and to credit of the Chinese, Sun Tzu, Art of War, is probably 1,000 years older, and many of the principles there make a great amount of sense in terms of being able to handle things. But ultimately, when the human component of the loss is gone, when casualties are no longer a factor for generals, and we are going to see warfare ultimately played out technologically, as I see it, and this is just. It's kind of like getting into the Star Wars scenario, if you wish, but the reality is that now it's going to be an attrition of machines, and then whatever's going to emerge from that. So the machine race, and it's pretty much what it's turning into, I think is very real.
Well, let's say they did develop one that would clean your house and do dishes. Would you have it in your house?
I don't think so. I don't have Alexa.
I'll tell you why I wouldn't have it in my house. I would think back to the Will Smith movie, I, Robot. Now, I'm bringing this thing into my house from an adversarial nation that can uplink, downlink through my Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. I'm asleep. That would be a great way to kind of really wreak havoc on an enemy. Turn on, go destroy the master of the house.
Well, well, that's comforting.
I don't want to give anybody any ideas, but it seems pretty obvious to me. But a couple of things have happened, and people like, nobody could have imagined this. I've heard in the past. I'm like, well, I must be really, really devious because I've imagined every one of these scenarios. That's why I don't go near some things.
Well, I personally don't feel comfortable. I just got Wi-Fi in the house here about a month ago.
That's because your friend, the AI, told you what you had to do. Much for you being in charge.
No, and actually, it was a result of the fact that cellular service in Florida during snowbird season is just so overloaded it doesn't work anymore. But the thing is that so many of those parts, and they're sold as convenience. That's how the camel gets its nose under the edge of the tent, because it's like, well, it's going to be able to do security for you. It's going to monitor everything in the house, and all of that data, as we're finding now, is that law enforcement regularly, can take and take the information from there and use it for surveillance. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing if they're trying to solve something, but on the flip side, privacy, which is
I
something.
don't even know why anybody believes in that.
You know, I mean, we're to the point now where with the tracking device, aka known as our phone, I don't know how much privacy there is anymore. And
For heaven's sake, look, people. And when I did drones, this was a funny one. People would say, we're I don't like these drones because they can see what I'm doing. And I said, yeah, but I can hear a drone. Like they're not really very silent. I know it's there.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. When I take my dog for a walk around my neighborhood, how many Ring cameras or other versions of that am I on that I don't even know? I don't even like.
Yeah.
I just assume I wake up in the morning and somehow I'm under video surveillance anymore.
1984 is not so far away, is it?
I mean, but here's kind of the other thing with that our tech companies were kind of arguing about, and it's the whole idea of the AI code. So China came out with DeepSeek pretty relatively quickly after OpenAI, and it turns out it's kind of like a knockoff, like it's elements.
Reverse engineered.
Yeah. So
Perhaps.
I mean, do we have to get a little bit smarter about what we're doing? I mean, now, and we're in March 2026 now, about the middle of the month, and just yesterday, President Trump signed a thing so our AI companies can compete more readily and decentralized rules, and and there are positives and negatives. I mean, and I keep coming back to this. It's hard to criticize because it's like, well, if we don't do it, the other nations will get ahead of us, and what will that mean for our society? But at the same time, if we do that, we have this completely unregulated body that we don't know where it's going to. I mean, I think this is what troubles me the most. We're in now, when you think about this in warfare, we're in an AI arms race of a kind.
We are.
But it's uncontrollable because we don't know where that's going to lead. Like we always knew kind of with the nuclear, there was this conception of mutual assured destruction. But if you're a machine, do you care?
And I think when we look at the law of unintended consequences, and we've had a few segments on this, when these chat bots came out, I don't think anybody really thought about what they're capable of doing. And it turns out they can do quite a bit, including convincing people to go commit suicide. So, there's a lot of unintended consequences. I personally become very uneasy with the fact that, we're experimenting with things that themselves could independently turn against us.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we're old, so we're skeptical, right? We didn't grow up with technology. It kind of came, right? I was probably, going really when this came about, probably my mid-20s when the World Wide Web came, maybe a little early 20s. You were well on your way through life, enjoying a normal life, and then all of a sudden this came into your life. We don't know where any of this is going to go, but one of the things that concerns me about any of this is how quickly I'm watching people just give up their autonomy to technology, give up their agency to technology. What can it do for me, kind of thing. I saw I saw something the other day. Dennis Prager, who's is kind of a free speech advocate, said something like this: "But mankind doesn't really yearn for freedom. We yearn for convenience, for being taken care of. That's really what we are. Freedom is a struggle, or else we would have seen many more free societies. And we're even seeing that, on college campuses. I can tell you, it's some of this stuff is utter lunacy to me that I've watched happen over the last decade. I mean, the whole fact that you would cancel someone because you didn't agree with their opinion, and you want to regulate what someone can say rather than having it out in the open discourse and react to it, but no, silence it because it hurt my feelings, as if your feelings were that important to our civilization. Now we have these robots that we're going to give our agency to. You take over my life, you take over my chores, you take over. Well, basically you've created a new entity of slave. Now, why are we always so want to do this?
What's changed right now is currently humans are the big threat. So being able to mesmerize them, and I think there was a great example in an effort to try to close this up. There was a great example with wild boars, I believe, where they tried to capture. And what they would do is, it was over time, they put corn in the center and they put one fence up. Then they put corn in the center and they put the second fence up. And then the last time, because it happened over time, eventually they just walked in and they closed the gate and they had them all. And we're getting very close to that. It's the ease that AI offers us, and all of the things that it can do is intoxicating. I think we have to recognize that it's not just that AI can turn against us. There are nefarious individuals who are looking to control our lives, and they're giving us the bait, and we are taking it hook, line, and sinker right now.
Oh my God, we're inviting it into our lives.
And you know,
how can you have a mind and not want to develop it? I mean, it mind boggles me. I know I'm a weirdo. I know I'm an oddball.
Well, you're an educator, first of all.
Well,
because,
I mean,
you know,
don't call me that. I'm an educator means I want you to develop your own
exactly.
opinion.
No,
these are indoctrinators
well,
we got in these schools now.
Another chapter. But, you know, I think that we have to realize that it's not just human nature. It's the nature of living beings for the most part. And I mean, wild hogs are not stupid, but they can be fooled. And we are being mesmerized and being fooled into a new world that I don't think we've 100% thought out where it's going to go.
Oh, I think we have. It's just in science fiction movies.
Well,
and it's never
true.
good. It doesn't end well.
Anyway, this has been a lot of fun. Great to see everybody again. Hopefully you'll tune in, subscribe, and give us a like.
Thanks. See you in the next video.